Hello, this is Mike Heumann, and welcome to the G2M Research webinar on storage architectures, AI, and biotech. This webinar is sponsored by NetApp, Panasys, NGD Systems, and WECA. Let's go through the agenda real quick. And so the first couple minutes I'll provide an introduction to the topic and talk about the ground rules. Then we'll go through each of the sponsoring vendors. We'll have a short presentation they'll talk about on the subject. We'll also then have 3 panel discussion questions that we'll ask the panelists and they'll answer. We'll also have a couple audience surveys in there for you. And then we'll finally have an audience Q&A session. And for that, please use the Q&A window on your Zoom desktop to put questions in. We'll go ahead and answer those questions when we get to the end of the presentation. Finally, everybody who's registered for this will get a copy of the slides in PDF format, as well as a link to the recording, which will be hosted on G2M Research's YouTube channel. Those both should go out on Thursday before the end of the day. So with that, let's just jump right into things. So my name is Mike Heumann. I'm the managing partner at G2M Research. So let's talk a little bit about artificial intelligence and biotech. So obviously, there's been a lot of different areas where artificial intelligence has been applied. In biotech, there's several areas that's found a lot of use in. COVID screening, obviously, gene analysis, understanding protein bindings, and disease identification and diagnosis. And this has really helped biotech companies speed up the manufacture and design of new drugs and new treatments and screening for other diseases as well, especially in the cancer area. So those are a couple of things we're going to talk a little bit about. The real question for this webinar is, what storage architectures are appropriate for biotech AI? As you probably know, most of the storage vendors out there today have optimized their architectures or have optimized versions of their architectures for AI workloads because they do present a different sort of workload than the standard storage architecture does, or standard workload that you'd see in the enterprise or on the cloud. In most cases, these solutions are available for both cloud and on-prem use. They have to provide a large amount of scalable storage with high performance. They also have to provide data management to store the data training sets and training results so that as you go back later and look at, how did my models do, you have some data to go against and you can rerun that data as you go forward. So those are some of the topics that our audience or our panel sponsors are going to talk to. We have with us today from NetApp, Esteban Rubens. He's the principal in the healthcare AI practice for NetApp. We have Scott Shadley, who's the VP of Marketing at NGD Systems. We have Greg Mazu, who's the Senior Systems Engineer at WECA. And for Panasys, we have Adam Marco, who's their Director of Life Sciences. And then one of their customers, Adam Barco, who's the Executive Director of CMI at UCSD. And with that, let me turn it over to Esteban. Go ahead, Esteban. I'm going to pass you control right now. There you go.
Thank you, Mike. Great to be here. Thanks, everyone, for attending. My name is Esteban Rubens. I'm the principal for Healthcare AI at NetApp, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're seeing in the market with our customers, life sciences companies mostly, who are engaged in AI research. And I'm trying to advance here, sorry. There we go. So we obviously know the requirements for AI workloads. That is certainly table stakes. You have to have the right storage to match up with GPU compute. Typically, we do see some CPU workloads, but mostly GPU in data science and AI broadly. The pain point that we see is around the data scientists themselves. So yes, table stakes, high throughput, low latency, whether you want to do file access on NFS or you want to do a parallel file system using either fast Ethernet like 100 or 200 gig or InfiniBand, that's all available. Now, just back to this point of the pain point, the data scientists are doing a lot of work that is not data science. The majority of their time, as a matter of fact, is spent doing things other than data science. So we want to make sure we're optimizing that so that the data scientists can get to their work, can do what they were trained to do and what they want to do. So we want to, and it's not that we want to, we do bring a cloud consumption model to data science. And this is informed by our broad customer base. Basically, all the large life sciences companies are NetApp customers, not exclusively maybe, but they certainly use NetApp. All the large life sciences companies that have been developing COVID vaccines have used NetApp for those efforts, some of which involve different levels of data science. So, what I'm telling you about today is based on this work, and certainly the pandemic has brought a lot of this pain to light in a different way because of the speed that was required to for these new projects. So we want to make sure through data science as a service that we bring everything together, that we are delivering these complete end-to-end platforms. And I know everybody talks about end-to-end. We talk about end-to-end, meaning from the infrastructure all the way up the stack, course, storage, compute, networking, but also the different kinds of software environments that are necessary, including API integrations, so that the work that data scientists need to do with the data that they're using is more efficient, and they actually don't need to go to IT to do a lot of the things that normally they would have to do. So we want to bring tools to them that are developed by data scientists. So maybe unbeknownst to some of you, NetApp employs a lot of data scientists who are building tools for data science that they themselves would want to use. So we have things like, and of course, no time to get into the minute details, but we have something called the AI control plane. We have data science toolkit. So basically integrations so that data scientists from Python, from Jupyter notebooks, from Kubeflow pipelines can do things like allocate space and trigger snapshots and clone data sets to share with other teams, all from those environments without having to involve IT. And most importantly, maybe, the concept of the data fabric. And this is what has resonated the most with our life sciences customers. It's this ability to have the right data in the right place at the right time with the right access characteristics, whether that's a protocol or that's an underlying medium where the data is stored. We want essentially the data to be free. So through data fabric, you can do that. It doesn't really matter what kind of setup the customer has. We can make it all work, whether it's 100% on-prem, which is unlikely to happen anymore, whether it's a hybrid of on-prem and cloud, which is the vast majority these days, or even cloud native. We have a lot of smaller companies that are starting out that are cloud native, and they do everything in the cloud. So through our ONTAP operating environment, which has been refined through many years, I mean, this is the foundation really that NetApp was built on. We can do this. We can have ONTAP on-prem. We can have ONTAP in the cloud. We can move data using the same environment, the same tool, the same API, and that's what has really worked well. And this is kind of a depiction of what that looks like. And of course, data is at the core. So data on ONTAP is at the core of these projects. This data is what's feeding AI models that are getting trained and then bring them to deployment so that they're useful. So when I was referring to a complete end-to-end solution before, I also mean MLOps. So our stack includes MLOps solutions so that the deployment of those trained AI models is more efficient and sped up so that people don't have to spend time doing those things. And really, MLOps is a really good moniker for this because it's automating everything that can be automated. It goes beyond your traditional DevOps. And so data ops or MLOps is the idea that, yes, you're going to be moving data, whether it's, as I said, file, NFS, SMB, object, S3 on the same environment, and it's going to be wherever it needs to be on an automated basis. And that's, when we're talking about our life sciences customers, we're talking about tens of petabytes or even more sometimes of research data. So they need to make sure that they have the right data in the right place. So for instance, in drug discovery, it's fairly typical to take visible light imaging of assays. So as an example, one of our customers is doing that. They have hundreds of millions of images that they take every year, but the subset of those images that is necessary to train models is certainly a small fraction of the total. So they image these assays worldwide. They move them up to a hyperscaler S3 bucket. They do some pre-processing, and then it's already in the data fabric. So then it can be moved down to an on-prem environment where they actually do the training using NVIDIA DGXs in Europe. And then the inference is done in the cloud. So they move those models again through MLOps up to the cloud. And so just if you have one thing that you take away from this is that the data is free to be wherever it needs to be. We can automate that movement. There are no constraints on-prem, in the cloud, any hyperscaler. And then on top of that, we've made some interesting acquisitions that allow us to offer very significant cost savings in terms of cloud spend. So we can offer 75, 80, even 90% reduction in cloud spend by leveraging the spot market for compute, whether it's CPU or GPU. And with that, I'm at my 8-minute mark, and I want to pass it on to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Esteban. Let me go ahead and give control. Our next speaker is going to be Andrew Bartko and Adam Marco. Andrew is from CMI UCSD. Let me give you control. You should have control right now.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Let's see if I can move the slides. There we go. Good morning. My name is Andrew Bartko. I'm the Executive Director for the Center for Microbiome Innovation at UCSD. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the usage of our collaboration and with Panasys today in our combating of the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'll describe a little bit about what we're doing and how we're doing it, and then turn it over to Adam to get into the technical details of our compute. So we've observed that during the almost a year ago that non-symptomatic people could still transmit COVID-19 and SARS-CoV-2 without really even knowing it. However, there's an opportunity to surveil for that material in the waste streams of people that are sick. So we found that we're not exactly sure when people start shedding the virus, but we know that it's before they become symptomatic. So that opportunity was something that we wanted to leverage to surveil the environment to understand when people got sick and or when people became infectious, and how to use that information to minimize the transmission of SARS-CoV-2 to the rest of the campus. So instead of having a lead time of several weeks to understand whether someone's sick, if we started to surveil the waste streams and wastewater on campus, we felt that we could reduce that time to detection several days. So that's what we did. We put in place 110 different wastewater samplers. That gray cylindrical cylinder is essentially a glorified peristaltic pump that draws wastewater from the sewers beneath those manhole covers for a period of 24 hours. So after that 24-hour period, we're left with about 1 liter of raw sewage that we then return to a laboratory and conduct some genetic sequencing and real-time PCR assays of that material for the SARS-CoV-2 virus. So our samples are brought back to the laboratory. Those laboratory processes then create sequence data. That sequence data is then uploaded into our storage, and then our bioinformatics tools are applied to that storage. So from day to day, we have the capability of determining whether SARS-CoV-2 was present or absent at that particular location on campus. So what we did was we plotted that out on our campus map. This map is live. Well, it actually was on the UCSD website. It's a live feedback. This is a screenshot of that live feedback. All the dark gray buildings are buildings that are currently monitored. All the red buildings are have tested on this particular date to have SARS-CoV-2 in its waste stream. So the interesting part of this is that we actually have exercised the process from end to end. For the dormitories that have tested positive, we encourage the residents of those dormitories to get tested for COVID-19. If they do become, or if they are determined to be sick, they are given the opportunity to quarantine in an isolation dormitory. Those are on the east side of our campus here, in the far right-hand corner. And they're there until they test negative for the virus on several consecutive days. So this whole process enabled the campus to be about 20 times less hazardous than the surrounding suburbs around the campus itself. So this active monitoring of the wastewater actually has an impact on the safety and welfare of our students. So to wrap this up and to turn it over to Adam, just some acknowledgements that I can let you read through. So thank you.
Thank you. Let me pass control to Adam real quickly. Okay, Adam, all yours.
Great. Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Okay, I'm clicking.
And sometimes it takes a second. There you go. Your mouse is moving now.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Barco, for speaking about that research that's happening at UCSD. And the analysis and storage of all that data does happen on Panasas Active Storage. Something that I think we'll see through the speakers during this event, and we probably all know intuitively, is there are a lot of researchers needing HPC. They need the compute, they need the GPUs, they need the storage. And this is just a plot from NIH BioWolf's cluster, which is the largest cluster devoted to life sciences research in the world, open life sciences research. And you can see in the past 4 or so years, the number of users needing HPC has more than doubled. However, the headcount has not more than doubled. So the need for HPC, the need for things like AI and ML is growing in the scientific community, especially in the life sciences. So we're seeing this in more than kind of what we traditionally think of HPC in the life sciences. And as far as Panasas, how we fit in, how we deal with life sciences workloads, we are a high performance hybrid solution. So we have mixed storage media. Every Panasas system ships with NVMe SSDs and hard drives, and those are all optimized without the user having to do anything. Data is automatically balanced to the ideal media transparently, and as a result, users get seamless total performance from all storage media. So this is not a traditional tiering solution as you may think of it, where you have to move data between supposed fast, medium, and slow tiers, or as we sometimes say, hot, cold, or very hot. This all happens without user intervention. And one thing we like to say at Panasas is in AI and ML, there is no cold data. So how does this work? What makes us unique? On the left, I have metadata, small files, and large files. Metadata is written in parallel to our NVMe. Small files are written in parallel to SSDs, and large files are written in parallel to the spinning disk hard drives that you see on the right in the gray box. And that is all managed for you by PanFS. So you don't have to worry about tiering. You don't have to worry about data placement. All your data is available at the same performance level and same latency. So there's no latency coming back from the cloud. There's no latency coming back from an object here or anything like that. So I know we fit in 2 presentations in our time, so I'm going to wrap up there. Thank you, everyone. You'll be getting the slide deck, so there's some contact information there, and I've got some appendix slides that I won't go through, but you can read them at your leisure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, let me pass control over to Greg here. Okay, Greg, you should have control.
Thank you. Just going to give this a try. I'm clicking and oh boy. Sorry, it's all right. Let's talk a little bit about Weka for a second and what we're doing. We are looking to make storage utility. We are trying to make it far simpler. We're trying to make it obviously as fast as possible and scale with much better economics. 8 of the Fortune 50 use Weka, which is quite interesting. Usually a company at our size and age, you would not have 8 of the Fortune 50s, but because we're solving such big problems for such big customers, we are seeing a great uptick in Fortune 50 customers using Weka, backed by industry leaders. These industry leaders are investors in Weka and are also going to market with Weka, Western Digital, Seagate, Hewlett Packard, and we're looking to provide, here we go, it's a little laggy here. We're providing 3 things in life sciences: simplicity, speed, and scale. We are trying to unify all the data so scientists and researchers don't have to understand where the data is. It always performs. It's always in a single pane for management. And you can use on-premise or on cloud services. We have the leading speed and performance in the industry. We provide resiliency without impact, and we're able to provide a tremendous solution in Amazon across diverse workloads. And we're scaling into the exabyte ranges, and we're providing flash and disk for the best economics. And I think it's always good to have some proof points of customers using Weka and what they've been able to provide. Here's a customer in the Boston area that's using Weka and Amazon to provide the highest possible flash solution while leveraging spinning drives for the greatest ability to store data over a long period of time at a reasonable price. This cluster is used for many different applications, which really shows that Weka can provide access to all sorts of data patterns, and you can simply shift the workloads as needed without having to move any data around within the cluster. You simply move the applications, and Weka will provide the correct performance and capabilities needed. And then here is one of our very largest customers, Genomics England. This is a public use case where Weka is being used for their genomics research. Interesting, during COVID, they were able to very easily shift some of their efforts over to COVID research without having to make any changes at all. They simply changed some of the applications, moved the applications over, and they were able to use the fantastic solution they had already purchased for genomics use cases. They were able to use it for COVID research. And then where are we moving to? So this is really where we see Weka moving in the future. Obviously, NVIDIA is an investor in Weka, so we are working with them and AWS to provide solutions in the cloud using GPUs. And we are in the process with several customers doing large-scale implementations in Amazon using NVIDIA's Parabricks and Amazon's flexibility, all on Weka, and providing Weka as a software storage platform in Amazon. Another way in which we're able to meet the needs of customers on premise, and as we see customers move into the cloud with one solution that can fit either on premise or in the cloud or provide data mobility in both directions. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Last, our cleanup hitter is Scott Shadley. Scott, let me give you control, and there you go.
Awesome. Well, welcome everybody, and thanks for participating in the event. As we're moving forward, you've heard from three great alternative solutions that involve a holistic platform. What we wanted to talk about today in our architecture is actually going one step down into what the product technology is, as far as what's supporting the storage products they have. And again, I'm having fun with the lag here as well. We offer a computational storage solution, which is built on an NVMe infrastructure. And so what we did is we took a look at the industry, and as all of these products are being deployed in the marketplace, we have this von Neumann architecture that involves compute, memory, and storage in some aspect of it. And as you've heard, there's lots of need, and we all know there's lots of need for compute in HPC, AI, and it comes into efforts around tech industry where we're putting in all kinds of interesting use. But the problem that we run into is we start to see a data gravity issue where there's so much information. As was mentioned, there's really no cold data out there. It's still hot for AI and ML type workloads. So what we decided to do is create an architecture that actually solves that problem by adding an additional processing unit, but we actually put it within the device itself at the storage layer. And so within our NVMe SSDs, as you continue to increase the amount of data being stored, we allow you to actually do work on that data locally within the device. And this can be leveraged using all kinds of different storage platforms. All of the previous presenters can leverage this architecture as it becomes more prominent in the industry and available for deployment across a lot of different architectures. And while we didn't have this necessarily up and running today for purposes of some of the COVID research that was done, we have had a lot of interaction with utilizing AI and ML and around the biotech industry as well. So what I wanted to show you here is an example of the architecture and what it looks like. So this is a fun little block diagram that I've created that shows the insides of our device. And of course, you're going to get these slides afterwards so you can take a look at it. But what we've done is we've created a architecture where we've put a quad core processing engine that has access to an ARM neural network within the device itself. And what the premise behind this concept is that bright yellow box that talks about the raw data that needs to be processed. Now, moving that data around over all of these different networks, single pane of glass, different footprints, AWS, on-prem, off-prem, cloud-based, is challenging when it becomes large sets of data in 32 terabytes, petabyte scale. So what we have been able to do with our architecture is embed a processing engine with an OS that can support containers as necessary and deploy things like ML or AI engines, neural networks, things like that. And what it does is it allows us to take that raw data and move it into a much smaller piece of information that needs to be processed by the host system itself. So a self-searchable, self-creatable, self-identifying, all these different types of ways to take a raw data set and convert it into more useful information while not requiring the host processing. So we'll see how well my little processing video works here. So what we're doing here is we're running an ML engine that is taking images and processing those images for what the contents are. Now, one of the highlights here is the bottom left shows the CPU. So the host platform was running the activity. As soon as we turned on the capability to do in-device processing, you can see the host was freed of all processing capability needed to go do other work, do meaningful work in other ways. And you see on the output on the right-hand side, as we add devices, we're now processing data in a much faster and parallel fashion because we have multiple devices identifying and doing localized research on their own products. So this is a distributed processing, not necessarily at the server or rack level, but all the way down into the within server at the device level. And so we've spent a lot of time working on that architecture and able to deploy it, have a lot of work that's being put forward. And we offer it in all of the traditional form factors and some new innovative ways to look at how to deploy them. So one of the things that challenges a lot of HPC environments is the power envelope that's required to be able to address some of these architectures. So you can see our particular devices come in the highest densities available to be able to consume all of that data that needs to be processed. And we offer the best efficiency or the amount of capacity per power consumed. So that when you're putting together a system, you've got CPUs, you've got GPUs, you've got storage. Storage tends to be 24, 48, 96 type drive architectures. They're consuming a significant amount of power that doesn't provide anything other than a data store. So while we're not only processing your data, we're saving a power envelope to make it free to add additional units. Because this isn't a replacement product for the CPU in the system or the GPU in the system, but it's an augmentation of those platforms in a way to better utilize those tool sets. So we've done a lot of work around real world workloads. There's a lot of information available on our website. We've done things like AI inferencing offloading, where we can do similarity searches or image tracking or object tracking. We have the ability to do distributed machine learning. I'll show an example of that in a moment. We can do something as simple as data science, search and find a needle. We have a platform or an example on our site that talks about how we can OCR anything and make it instantly searchable and relocatable of information. And then, of course, everything's stored in a database somewhere, some form of database. We have a lot of different database platforms that we can support inside the device. We can create database nodes inside the devices themselves. And so for an actual example that we've done in the biotech space is we worked with a platform called BLAST, the logic alignment search tool. And what this is doing is looking for similarities in sequences and things like that. So the graphic over here shows that in a very large terabyte database, even if I add additional CPUs, by adding additional CPUs within the devices themselves, I can give you 100% performance gain in the actual processing of that data. So if you see as you watch this particular graphic, if it starts to play, there it goes. As we add devices, the acceleration of this similarity sequencing process increases drastically as you have more actual NGD devices here in the back view of this growing. So this is actual data showing if I were to add CPU cores, I can certainly improve it, but I can double that performance capability by simply adding the CPUs within our devices as well. So this is a great way to highlight how storage you already have, storage you already need, can bring additional new value to your platforms. So from an ML perspective, we went and played with a whole bunch of different neural networks. We've trained across a lot of different data sets. We do see different acceleration values that we provide based on the number of drives we add and the type of tool that we're using. I want to highlight that none of these neural networks, none of these processes that we're highlighting have been modified in any way by NGD. They've simply been copied into the device, run in a local environment, and then the results of those training efforts that have been done are presented back to the host for coalescing. So the host still does the final, the last mile of the work, or the cleanup, if you will. But the devices themselves offer a significant acceleration factor in the ability to process the data within each of the devices. And of course, since we're processing locally in a much more efficient rate, with freeing the CPU to do other work, we consume significantly less power in that overall process as well. So that's my quick few minutes of fame, if you will. Hopefully it was informative. There's lots of information on our website as well. And just to wrap it up, there was one question thrown into the Q&A. The E1S drives that we have are industry leading at 12 terabytes apiece.
Thank you very much, Scott. Grab control here. We'll start going to the panelist questions here. All right. So our first panelist question is, how does storage for biotech AI applications differ from other AI applications and or other HPC applications? We'll start with NetApp, then go to Panasys, Weka, and last to NGD systems.
Yeah, sure. The main difference is the scale, and for our customer base, the global requirement that it's a highly distributed environment for these companies that have data sources all over the world. They need to have data in a shared capacity, typically more skewed towards object. So maybe it's not unique, right? But we see a lot of object when we're talking about image acquisition. You have, hundreds of millions to billions of objects acquired annually. These research libraries have to, they have a lot of inherent value, even if it's not realized immediately. That data never goes away. It's unlike other kinds of data. It's certainly more like healthcare. That's something that we see has a lot of parallels. But to wrap it up, the scope and global footprint, and of course, as everybody knows already, the bandwidth and low latency requirements. Yeah, that goes without saying.
Perfect. Adam, do you have anything to add to that from your guys' perspective at Panasys?
Sure. It's challenging because you have large data sets, and like the other presenters have said, you can't really move them to an archive cold tier and forget about them for 10 years. You need those data sets for retraining your models, and you're continuously generating those new data sets, whether it's in life sciences or autonomous vehicles or anything. So having an efficient way to access them in a low latency manner is very important for retraining. And then another thing that's important is managing all of them. Life sciences data is very, very fragmented. So storage infrastructure needs to be thought of as how are you going to manage disparate data sources, or primarily disparate data sources to draw insights for these AI and ML initiatives.
Perfect. And Greg, what do you want to add to this?
Yeah, I think the biotech AI applications are also moving at a faster pace, and customers are also looking to store that data on premise or in the cloud. And having the ability to live in both locations provides a lot of value for the application, and that we see as a real requirement for these customers is to be able to do things in the cloud and on premise.
Perfect. Scott, how do you
I would
guys
agree.
see the difference between them?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with everyone that's previously said that there is an absolute need for having that data resident and always available. The fact that you're doing the constant retraining is key, and being able to find a way to properly manage that massive amount of data without driving massive movement costs is really key to it as well. So there is certainly leading edge technology here that helps showcase how to better utilize tool sets over other workflows and other groups.
Perfect. Let's go to the first audience survey question. That audience survey question is, to what extent is your organization utilizing AI and ML in your business processes? And it's check one. I'm going to launch it. Give you a couple minutes to go ahead and fill it in. And while you do that, we'll go to panel question two. Again, just use your Zoom Q&A window. You should be able to, or your Zoom polls window, you should be able to go ahead and answer these. And we'll go to the second panel question. And that question is, we've heard all about the importance of managing training data sets, even as they evolve over time. What technologies are key to integrating and managing different data types? We'll start out with you, Adam, and then go to Greg, then to Scott, and then finally to Esteban.
Thanks. And yes, when I was consulting, I've seen organizations where one department didn't know what the other department was doing. And when you have these AI and ML initiatives that need to integrate that data, it becomes an almost insurmountable cultural challenge as well as a technical challenge. So as far as technologies, there's some open source applications out there. I know there's some commercial applications as well. So beyond the hardware aspect that a lot of us are really describing here, there's the software and human layer where we have to get a better handle on our life sciences data. Not only is it historically messy, it's now being generated faster and faster by more instruments than ever before. So it really comes down to appropriately handling, beyond the performance aspect, handling the metadata and the way the users interact with the data.
Excellent. Greg, what do you have to add to that question? How do you guys see it?
I think the metadata piece is spot on. I think being able to take the data, but then have an easy, searchable, understandable metadata layer around the data that you are bringing in so that you're using and working on the data that you expect and use. And I also think that there's some effort to be done in automation where the data is coming in and then technologies are waiting for data and then looking at that data and then classifying that data so that some of that metadata is auto-generated, taking the load off the scientists and the data scientists, and then using that data to run the models against to also make sure that we're looking at the right sets of data first versus looking at all the data all over again.
That's a really good point. As somebody I think said earlier, there's only X amount of data scientists, but the data sets keep growing, so automation certainly helps with that. Scott, what do you guys see on this one?
I definitely agree with the previous answers. The real data itself is of significant value, as we all know, but how to manage that data using the metadata, where where and when and how to find it and what it consists of is very key. Because to your point, there are a lot of different data types, but the metadata can actually help manage that for the different applications and layers that they're using. So that's a key aspect of it, and something that can also be done at the individual device level as well. So it's a great opportunity for us as an ecosystem to build a way to better point to the data sets that we're looking at versus necessarily just moving those data sets around.
Very good. And Esteban, what technologies does NetApp see? I mean, you talked about some in your presentation, but do you want to add anything to that one?
Sure. Yeah, of course, there's the storage layer. There's no doubt about that. And even adding things for data provenance and helping with the overall data governance aspect. We find that a lot of customers struggle with that. They have a lot of data, but they're it's all over the place. There are too many silos. So that's something that we always engage in. We like to bust those silos and make sure that we can consolidate as much as possible. And then having good scientific data management systems. We work with partners. There's iRods, that's open source. We work with Flywheel and others. So it's clearly at the technology layer for infrastructure, but also this metadata management within a system that is built for that use case, right? So in life sciences, you need something that's different than in academic medicine, for instance. So that's very important in terms of not only managing the data as it evolves and ages, and you still have to keep track of it, and you have more data coming in, but also being able to do, essentially show your work. There's a reproducibility crisis in science in general, but certainly in AI research. So being able to snapshot things appropriately, not just the training data sets, but the models themselves, because as you're retraining, as the other panelists have alluded to, people are tweaking them. They're changing the hyperparameters and making adjustments, and these are highly iterative processes. So you have to be able to keep track of what you did at a very large scale, because there are many, many teams working on many problems. And so eventually these results get to publication, and you have to be able to help out with the reproducibility. Otherwise, there's very negative repercussions for those teams.
Yeah, that's putting it mildly. I think those are all great points. That the data management is certainly very important in this. Let's see. Our second audience survey question is: when looking at implementing AI and ML storage solutions, who do you look to for guidance on hardware and software choices? Is it check all that apply? We'll go ahead and launch this poll. You can use your window to answer the questions. And while we do that, we'll go to the panel question number 3. And that question is: all of your companies provide on-premise storage solutions. How does the cloud fit into the storage architecture and solutions for AI applications? We'll start with Panasys and go to Weka, then NGD, and finish up with NetApp.
Thanks, this is Adam. I think cloud bursting and true cloud scalability is everyone's goal. Organizations are just starting to get there from my viewpoint. I don't think it's necessarily solved, and there are a number of infrastructure challenges beyond additional challenges like billing and who manages what and who's responsible. So the cloud is certainly a key component of, or is almost certainly a key component of every organization's strategy going forward. It's just comes down to how to appropriately implement that, especially when it comes to AI and ML, because of the unique challenges surrounding that.
Very good. Greg?
Yeah, we provide obviously an on-premise ability with Weka software, but we also provide Weka to be run in Amazon. And we have many customers running these workloads in Amazon in their entirety. They've been able to solve the data, the ownership, the billing, in which Weka's provide as a massively scalable system that allows customers to scale up and down the workflows in the cloud as needed. And customers are finding that they've been able to do far more research in Amazon because of the ability to burst into the infrastructure versus what they've had on premise. And so we are starting to see a lot of these workloads move in that direction. So having a ability to provide a storage solution in the cloud has become very important to the customers we're working with. It's a requirement.
Absolutely. Scott?
Yeah, from that perspective, it's definitely, on-premise is a big piece of it, but tying into the infrastructure that exists within the cloud is certainly a key aspect of it as well. And so part of our efforts are to also ensure that the solutions we provide not only come as a product that you can acquire and put on-prem, but also working today with a lot of the hyperscale and cloud storage providers to have instances of our solutions. So there's that seamless capability and offering a lot of back-end support for the cloud architectures as well. When we got back to the metadata question, we can do a lot on the back end to make those architectures more efficient, and you may not even know that our devices are there. So maybe not something that you necessarily as a customer actively utilize our tool, but it's supporting your efforts as you do the on-prem to cloud architecture development.
Very cool. And Esteban.
Yeah,
Obviously
so
a big part of your offering.
for us as well, we originally were focused on-prem, before there was cloud basically, but now we offer cloud storage as well. So we offer cloud storage, as I was alluding to, ONTAP and others with all the hyperscalers, right? AWS, GCP, Azure, and these are first-party services. So if you go to the app stores, you can buy those. We have many, many different options. So we view cloud storage as absolutely fundamental. Our customers demand that we do that because all our large life science and healthcare customers have cloud as an integral part of what they do. I was alluding to that before in terms of the global scope of the work that they do. It's not only an integral part, but they really couldn't function without it. So very important for us to be able to offer the same experience across on-prem and cloud, and that's really the direction that NetApp is going in, is becoming a data management company more than a storage company across the hybrid multi-cloud is sort of the marketing jargon, right? But sort of any hyperscaler, any access protocol, and any way to move the data, and that's what the company really is moving towards and betting the farm on, really, and not just on the storage side, but the compute as well, being able to manage that and optimize the compute aspect of cloud consumption, whether it's CPU, GPU, TPU, newer things that are coming into to the picture as the hyperscalers are developing their own compute platforms as well.
Very cool. Let's see, we have one question in the Q&A window. We've got a couple others that have been answered as we've gone through. And that question is, what types of research areas have yet to benefit from AI? Why don't we start with you, Esteban, and then we'll go to Adam, then to Greg, then to Scott.
I would say that it's a matter of application. Every area of healthcare and life sciences that I've seen has had people working on AI for that area. The big gap is in the application, the bringing those models into production, particularly making sure that the models fit into existing workflows. There's a big mismatch between people who are doing research that's really great and even could solve problems, but people are overworked. There's burnout in life sciences. There's massive burnout in healthcare. So you can't expect that people are going to add steps to the workflow. So it's vitally important to integrate these tools, AI-based tools with any kind of neural network-based computation into existing workflows so that they can deliver some benefits. So to me, it's not a matter of what areas, all areas have benefited, but it's what areas are actually deriving those benefits. And I would say the majority aren't. And so life sciences is better than most, or drug discovery and clinical trials are two areas that have benefited hugely. But we're seeing how things like RPA, robotic process automation, are making big inroads, even in life sciences, on the back office and clinical trial side. So it's again about operationalizing those benefits.
Yeah, certainly applying the wrong models is it can be problematic and lead to the wrong results. No doubt about that. Adam, do you have anything to add on that question?
Yeah, I think a lot of the new data generators in life sciences at the basic research side haven't really benefited, and that's because they don't. A lot of the data is just not very clean. A lot of the data isn't shared, and there just isn't enough data to accurately train models. And probably the biggest, most high-profile one, I would say, is cryo-EM. And there are maybe, I think it's about 4,000 cryo-EM structures known versus over 150,000 X-ray structures. So we just don't have the data set to get very good, broadly applicable applications, like the previous presenter said. So in summary, I think it's the early stage research that's really starting to generate large amounts of data that hadn't previously.
Very good. Greg?
I think there's also a bit of a learning curve going on here, right? We have new applications. We have people that are learning how to leverage accelerated computing, and they have to now figure out how to bring that into the research. And then, I think we also have the FDA that might be a little behind on really giving guidance around AI as well. And then I think you also have to make sure that the solutions that you're storing the data on are modern so that you can get the most out of your AI models versus maybe storing it on solutions of the past.
Makes perfect sense. Scott, what have you guys seen on this one?
I'd like to kind of leverage right off that last comment and the fact that there was recently an application put out that the US is falling behind in its AI deployment and research capability. And I think it leverages directly off of that comment that the infrastructures and the architectures that we're using are not evolving as quickly as they can, especially in the efforts that are being put forward, because there's a lot of politics getting in the way of actual science. And I don't mean to go negative in any way, shape, or form on that front in this call. Sorry about that. But it's just, I think that's part of the fix is there are plenty of additional research areas. I think they all are using it in some way, but their infrastructures need that extra bump that we can now provide them with some of these new ways to put systems together to solve those problems.
Really, really good response. And our last question is for Dr. Bartko, and that question is, can protocols that UCSD is using be standardized for use at other cities or universities worldwide? Dr. Bartko, are you there?
He may be on mute.
Looks like maybe perhaps we lost him. His presentation is very interesting. My son goes to UCSD, so yeah, we heard about this. Adam, do you want to try to answer that question?
Yeah, I think that's most certainly likely. I know Center of Microbiome Innovation maintains a lot of partnerships academically and actually with commercial organizations. So with a lot of their research, whether it's COVID related or not, it really comes down to, is this implementable nationwide or globally in a standardized way so that other organizations can do this. So I believe that's probably one of the goals, because that's an overarching theme of their organization.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you everybody for joining our webinar. Thank you for our panel, Esteban, Adam, Dr. Bartko, Greg, and Scott. As a reminder, we will be sending out in about 2 days a link to this recording to everybody that registered, as well as a PDF of the slide set. Be looking for that before close of business on Thursday. Thank you very much for your time. I hope this was interesting to you, and have a great day.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you to my panel.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Bye.
Thank you.